We're rolling?
Check. Yes.
Awesome.
We're good.
Well, great. Here we are, another episode of the Brooks McDonald podcast. Been a couple weeks. Just life. Tyler's about to be a father for the third time.
Yes. I'm outnumbered.
Yeah, that's right. Got to play zone now. No more man-to-man.
Yeah.
So excitedly waiting on the arrival of baby Milky. That's Tyler's last name. By the way,
Yeah.
he will need some
It won't
Milky.
be covered in
He
milk.
needs some Milky, but that's her last name. So yeah, we're excited about that. But today we're going to kind of unpack. Last week I was in Atlanta listening to the author Eckhart Tolle speak. Eckhart Tolle is the author of a few books. I believe one's called The New Earth. The one that most recently that I read was The Power of Now. And, you know, people may be wondering, especially as a podcast, if you're new here, we really try to look to say, hey, how do we be our best selves? And I've been to a lot of motivational events out there, but most of those events are void of Christ. And as a Christian, I like to have a platform to unpack some of this information, but also have the frame of reference of Christianity as well. So you may wonder, this is a great example of that because Eckhart would not claim to be a Christian, I would say.
Part of that like new age crowd.
Yeah, well, and just very much so of there's a consciousness and enlightenment that many different people in history had, which Christ was one of them, but also the Buddha and others, and he kind of puts them in that same camp. And so as Christians, if you saw that, like, whoa, man, I'm out. But I believe, first of all, if as certain Christians, depending on your walk, you may not want to go into those roads because it may be wavering. But I feel strong enough in my faith, and I would challenge other people that you need to be thinking and understanding. One of my examples in some way could be that, as I was talking to Tyler with before, was, you know, there's probably a lot of things in modern day science that we have in hospitals that are treatments that were not present in Jesus's time, but we still do it. And we don't question, was that against the Lord or not? Now, apples and oranges in some ways, but some of the study that's going on with some of these groups has to do with where your thoughts lie in the brain versus in our dimension. How do you think? How do you think about the future? And where's your mindset? Is it in positive things or negative things? And all those pieces in a lot of ways line up directly if you filter it through what we're talking about directly through. Tyler, what was the book you were reading that just had a general discussion about being present in the now?
Oh yeah, it was a soul keeping book, and he put it as if you can have daily contentment with God and the things around you. So basically, having God at the center of it, but you're content with where you're at. You're not necessarily thinking about the past. You're not necessarily thinking about the future. You're just content in the presence of God today.
Yeah,
take up your cross daily, kind of a.
Yeah. So I love that reference because it's a great reference to when I think about Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. His point is, can you be in the present? And if you're going to be focused on being in the present, we need to have some simple understandings in place. And that one of those understandings is that our soul, as Christians would call it, I think he just calls it consciousness as a universalist, for lack of better terms. If we can understand that our soul is not our brain, and so the way our brain behaves, the way our brain secretes serotonin or endorphins or all these chemicals based on how we think and behave, that's not our soul. That's our brain excreting those things. And a lot of times also we grew up with these norms. You were a baby at one point, I was a baby, and we had these basic understandings that happened to just happen based on how your parents treated you, the world around you, what was going on. And it became this framework for your decision making. And that formed you. And you think that's you. All the time you'll say, well, that's just how I am, or that's how I behave. But it could be even some past traumas. Around, is a book I was reading said, if you walked in at a young age and you saw your childhood dog die on the floor, that would imprint in you so much a memory, so much so that maybe if you saw a dog walk by, you would be reminded of that dog, or you saw a collar, or the favorite place of a park where that dog used to be with you, you would immediately think of that dog. And those are past experiences, and especially in those examples, traumas that are leading you to who you have formed your brain to think and be. But that's not you. That's not your soul, I would challenge. Now, you could get some really philosophical things. Well, how do you decide to sin? What makes you predisposed if your father was an alcoholic for you to be alcohol, relating substance abuse to where the way God looks at you? And we could wade off in something really, really deep. But if we can come to a general principle and understanding to say, and we can agree, when we die and we go to heaven, at least what we've seen when we've been at funerals or at autopsies done, the brain does not go with the soul. It stays in this human body. It goes in the ground. And so it's the idea that everything that you aren't, you leave behind when you die. And your brain's one of those things. And your brain is an organ that helps you think critically. Your prefrontal cortex is the brain that helps you for creative thinking. Your old brain down deeper inside are the basic memos, but we've talked about neural pathways on here. Sorry if you're first coming on like, what in the world are they talking about? The neural pathways are repetitive behaviors. It's your body that can learn things. That's why you can back out of a parking spot, chew bubble gum, yell at the kids, change the radio and the AC all at the same time, because you have these pre-understood tendencies that your body moves to. If we don't ever sit and think about what those preemptive moves that your body makes, who's controlling you, your mind or your soul or your body in these habits? And so it's challenging you. Think about that, all for the point of sitting in this very moment, exactly what you just said. Because how much of your day, like mine, I had an adventure with a bank recently. There was a wire that was supposed to be inbound to my account. The bank that sent it said they sent it. The receiving bank said they hadn't seen it. And it was like, okay. And for like 3 days, as much as I feel like I've studied and read this, I was fretting over the what ifs. What if somebody stole the money? What if went to somebody else's account? Thinking about this random fictitious person spending my money somewhere. And what happened to my body? Well, stress started to build and joint pain starts to happen and all those things because I'm thinking about a future moment that hasn't even happened yet. And in Christianity, just like in the book you're reading, God calls us to be present, because how many situations did I miss over those few days where I could have been present for someone in need, that I was instead worrying about something that in reality turned out just fine. If the money showed up today, it was just a random little thing. We had to solve it. It had to happen to go over a weekend. And so can we just be here? Can we be right now? So there was he talked about a really great analogy that I really think is great with Christianity. He talks about a ripple. And the idea is that we could say ripple, we could say a wave, but either way, we both know in the ocean or in water, let's think of the ocean, a wave that's moving in, and the wave, as we would all agree, is connected to this larger ocean. It actually, if you really challenge it, is one being, the ocean itself. But we're talking about the wave. And he compared our existence to being a wave. And we get worried about ourselves with the wave. Well, what's the wind direction coming like? How high is the wave today? How low is the wave today? Am I moving at a fast speed or not? What happens if I collide with other waves? It usually doesn't seem to be very, very good, meaning other people. But we fixate on this. And if you think of it to a smaller effect, even a ripple in the ocean is us. But it's a part of this huge ocean that's an expansive thing. And I love that analogy for us because he calls the word source. I call it God and creation and the universe. Our connection to everything around us and to what God created is so much deeper than just this not annoyance, but this minute detail of what we are. And even so much so, Francis Chan's comparison, he has a big rope strung across a stage and he puts a little bit of electrical tape on this 1,000-foot rope. And he holds it up and he says, this electrical tape represents your time on earth. That's from 0 to 85 on this electrical tape. Everything in front of it, behind you, but imagine it being infinite in both ways, is the rest of your existence. Yet you're sitting here thinking about, oh my gosh, I got student loans to pay back. Oh my golly, this guy cut me off in the street. My car's getting funny. Inflation's happening. Stock market's crashing. Oh my gosh. And it's this one little piece of the rest of eternity. And that's the reference that I want us to walk in. Now, if you read Eckhart, and some people may take this to that, but I tend to go a different way. Is the nervousness a lot of people would have, like we've discussed, is like a prosperity gospel, health, wealth. If we learn how to manipulate some of these things, well, then we're manipulating it for prosperity, and we think we're our own gods.
Yeah, that's
that
the
we
big
can,
thing is like, who's the God, you or God?
yeah.
Who's manifesting it kind of thing.
And my every recording of podcast reference to Erwin McManus of We're Created to Create. God gave us this amazing ability to steward all of the world and all of creation. And we mess that up pretty early, but still we have this dominion. We're the only dwellers on earth that were created in his image. And so we have these amazing abilities in that creation. So I recorded a little video and shot it out, yesterday. Where does that begin, and how did that start? Where was his basis of it? He says that just first of all, your senses, if you can have an awareness of your senses, then you're one step away from being present. His point is, if you can feel something, if you can see things, smell, then you are presently aware of your current moment versus thinking about what you have to do this afternoon. And so if you can get to that point of where, okay, I'm feeling my body right now, then could you just be in a place? He says, have you ever been in those moments to where, not in deep in thought, but you're just so happy in a moment that it seems like it was only 2 minutes, but an hour went by. You're so involved. That was when you were present. And he said, it doesn't have to be every day, all day, but even if it was 2 minutes where you're just present. And I think a lot of that present has to do with gratitude. Talks about little kids. We long for this childlike wonder. And I do think there's a reference to Jesus saying, let them children come to me. You must be like a child in order to the kingdom of heaven. There is a reference, I think, to us being just present in moments. Can we not just, a child walks out and you see this look on their face and they're driving, and oh, wow, an amazement as they see the trees for the first time. I say when we moved down to Florida and I would drive through Sandestin and I would see these big live oaks that hang over. For the first, it was so beautiful and awe-inspiring. It took about 6 months. But after about 6 months, I didn't pay attention to the trees anymore. I would drive and I would think about what an employee challenge I've got going on or an acquisition that we're working on. And my brain would put it all away. It would become a neural pathway. It became a habit. And I stopped seeing the newness again. I stopped being present and I was thinking about other things. So how in your day could you just sit and say, man, that was a beautiful flower. That was a pretty tree. Thank you that the wind's blowing cooler. Does that have any reference to what you were saying with the book?
Yeah, I love the reference you're talking about, the ripple and the wave, because I think of like the wave that's pushing and it's up higher, and it's easy to kind of like look out and look at all the things around and forget where it's actually connected to. And just taking some moments to plant yourself and to remember that we're sourced in God,
or someone else's ripple's bigger than my ripple.
Yeah, you worry too much about the other ripple, the other wave, and some of these other things. But I love that reference of like, it's easy to look up or look around and then forget about this giant thing that we're all connected to, and that we're. I don't know. I like that kind of reference, and I think we were talking about it at lunch. But one of the other things was. Even if you're not a believer and you're not necessarily sold on God or anything, but just taking the time to humble yourselves and remember that
yes,
we are so, even if you don't believe there's a God and all this stuff connecting us, that we are so small and minute in the grand scheme and the big picture of all this.
Yeah.
And just having that humbled stance is just kind of a beginning to being present of all the things around, because it kind of strips away some of this prideful mindset that is always all over the place. And I got to keep this, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. Yeah. Just saying I'm so small, I'm so insignificant, And
I think there's two sides there of perspective. I think a lot of Christians look at the rest of the community like, oh, I'm nervous about that because they are thinking they're their own God. And so I don't even want to go there because that's going to lead me down that same path. Versus there's other people that to the other extreme would say, I don't want to know God. That's just guilt and shame, and I don't even want to know that. I don't know where we came from, but it surely isn't from a bunch of ugly type people like that. And so you see these two different frames of reference. And I think that's, if you even study a lot of these authors, the perception is that, well, if you think you're creating it, but their view even is, if they compare to Gandhi, it's about being in a present moment and being able to be happy in the moment. Meaning in the moment is in a world that is not free of pain and hardship, that pain and hardship is guaranteed, and that you can be present fully. And I believe in our faith walk, and that's why even these writers give so much credit to Jesus Christ that don't even believe in his divinity. But truly his example in and of itself was one of a man that walked in the moment through hard pieces, yet spread so much joy and peace, and then was on the ultimate test on the cross, but asked for forgiveness for the people around him, told a man that he would enter the kingdom of heaven with him that was truly a criminal. Man, I appreciate that even. Now, again, I hope one day they come to know Christ as I know him, and I believe the Lord walks in those pieces, but I'm at least excited to see that start and that piece.
Yeah, but believers kind of mess up because we're imperfect. We screwed up, and we kind of give God and Jesus a bad name a lot of times. But you've even been seeing, like, Rogan has been saying stuff over and over as of late. Well, if you kind of practice and look at Jesus and some of the things of the Bible, there's a lot of really good stuff there. And I think that's where a lot of the New Age and some of these other speakers have pulled a lot of the good, I can't think of the right word, but just the good out of it, and that they've thrown out God, as the source of it, but there's a lot of good there. And unfortunately, like I said, we as believers have kind of not always given God the greatest name. We've not always walked in love, but if you actually study Jesus, you actually study what he did, you actually see how he walked in love with people, how he walked in truth with people, and how he was present, even to the point of somebody touched his garment. There's a story of a lady grabbing, touching just a piece of his clothing, and he's in this massive crowd
where many people were touching him.
Who touched me? And the disciples were like, "What are you talking? There's this huge crowd around you.
Right.
Everyone's touching you."
Yeah.
And he goes, "No. Like, he was so...
I felt the power leave me.
Yes, so in tune with what was going on. It wasn't about the big crowd or whatever. He knew something changed. Something was different. Somebody touched me in a different way because they had faith to receive."
And in some ways, in defense of some of these guys that are speakers, they don't want to use the word God and religion.
It scares
because
people
so
away
many
sometimes.
people have scared or preconceived notions and bad experiences. They're trying to figure out ways to break through to somebody, and they know that's a trigger word for them.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
I think
That's
there's a
so
lot of believers
sad.
that I've tricked myself into doing this, where you're careful about saying the wrong thing or whatever because you're worried about what they think, even though you love God and you want to share it and you want to share these things. But because there's such a negative connotation in some regards, which we shouldn't be afraid of, but there is out there, that we think people just turn away the second you say the word Jesus. And I'm not going to listen to that.
Yeah, I mean, even at that speaking event, he said, I could use the word God, but I choose not to because that triggers in so many people a piece. And it wasn't him like saying we're above it. I could see the humble humility in the guy's face say, no, I'm saying it because I can tell I'm going to lose you. Just like I'm not going to bring up politics because I'm going to lose half of you immediately.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to stay connected in the conversation and lead you down a path, of what that looks like. And so I think that was just a good piece to unpack. And the other conversation around that I had, which shifts gears a whole lot, but is just talking about encouraging people to get outside their norm. It relates in the way of, you've got to remember that where you grew up and how decisions were made around you and the format of just the community that you were in shaped everything about you, which is good. And a lot of good people and a lot of good came out of that. But also it can cause people to make assumptions when they see somebody make decisions differently or go about answers or life differently. An us and them mentality of, well, they're wrong and I'm right because I decide to tie my shoes with my left shoelace over the right one than they do the right over left. And the more you get out and travel, the more you get out and experience or move away and experience away for a while, the more likely you are to have more gratitude and more grace about the process people go through, because you open your eyes to see there was a reason why those people went about that. And if you grew up in that situation, you probably would make that decision that way. I think more people around could do that everywhere. And it could not have to be move way away, but when I was growing up in youth group, we would do what's called Power Hour. We would go inner city into really low income areas, and we would do devotionals together. Even that as a kid, how much I can look back and be influenced to walk in somebody else's shoes and see how they lived, how much more I was likely to give grace, and also sometimes admit I was wrong. That'd be surprisingly terrible, but to admit maybe I wasn't doing it the right way, but these people maybe have a better route to understanding. We talk about having kids, and I tell people all the time that haven't had kids, you don't realize how selfish you are till you have kids. People get offended by that word selfish. And I don't mean that in the negative term. I mean, selfish is in you have a whole lot of time for yourself to focus on self, and you don't realize how much that is until you have a child. In the same way, I think traveling and getting outside of your norm and where you're at is another way. Until you do that, you don't realize how limiting your frame of reference is around you until you see other people's walks. And that travel may be 5 miles away into a different part of town and breaking bread with somebody, and maybe thousands of miles away.
And if you can't do that, then read.
Yes.
Try to find books that are outside of your normal comfort zone. And you may read it and be like, this I ain't getting out of this, but there's probably going to be stuff that you can pick up, and thankfully we're in an amazing era where, I hate to read. I hate to sit down and read. I will sit there and reread the same page over and over and over. It's really hard for me because my brain will just go other places. But when I realized, I can do audiobooks, I can listen to a podcast, I retain it so much better. I go through it so much better. Yeah. We live in a great age where there's almost no excuse for not learning and not trying to experience other things, even if you can't afford to go somewhere, which I'd challenge that we can all afford it to some extent. Sure. It may not be every week, but there's a way to get out from your comfort zone. But if you can't do that, would tell you that listen to something new.
Dave Ramsey would tell you can afford it. Totally. You can afford it.
Yeah.
There's like this TikTok. This guy.
I love those memes of like Dave Ramsey hiding behind the corner going, I see you. Yeah. He's at Starbucks.
Sitting there. It says like a millennial eating a $60 steak, all while
Dave
paying his with a credit card. And the music's like, like that's creepy music, and Dave's like peering around the corner.
I got
anybody can afford it
at Chipotle.
Yeah, like I listen on the app Audible. There's audiobooks 1,000 different ways. I think probably every one of them though you can adjust the speed at which you listen. Because I realized if I read at a normal person's speed, which is sadly enough how I learned to read was like hearing the voice in my head, that it would be so slow that my brain would get tired and go to sleep. But if I sped it up a little bit, I would actually be more engaged. So I was at like 1.8, and I thought I was like superhuman at 1.8 speed listening. That means like,
80% faster.
180%. 80% faster than where you're listening. And then I got on a plane and I was talking to this girl, and she was talking about it, and she was at 2.2 times. So that's like, they always said the guy that broke a 4-minute mile, it's been done by so many people. You just took one person to do it because everybody else knew it could be done. I'm like, well, I can do it faster than that. So I'd like to say I'm listening at a 2.5 speed now, which sounds crazy, but once you get adapted to it, you can hear what they're saying. You just got to get your brain trained to do it. And I realized I would rather listen to it twice at 2.5, meaning I still listen faster than one person at a regular speed listened at one time. I can listen to it twice at 2.5 and still be done faster than that one person did.
So you might have sold me on that, because I've tried speeding it up and I keep finding that I miss too much, or I just don't like it. So I always back it back down to 1 because it just feels more natural. But you're selling me on the idea of trying to get up to 2 and listen to it twice.
Well, they're like 8 or 9 hours, or a lot of them.
I might get more out of it that way, actually.
There's like 8 or 9 hours typically in the books that I'm seeing. Yeah. So now it's 3.5 hours that you're doing it at. And it's like, whoa, you found all of a sudden, like you're moving through the material. So see, you never know when you come and hang out with us, what little tidbits that you could walk away with, But yeah, that's for today. Thanks for hanging with us and chatting as always. We love to hear from you. If this is helpful to you, giving us feedback would be great. If you also liking it, sharing with other people means the world to us also. But yeah, we're excited to bring you something again, hopefully in another couple weeks. And until then, I hope you make it an awesome day, and just practice gratitude, be grateful for the world around you. How can you serve other people? Let's get out of our own way and serve others. That would be what I'd leave you with. Thanks a ton.